because I think it can be hard to receive
Yeah.
gifts a lot of the time. It can be hard to receive help. I'm not used to it. I'm usually the provider, and I suppose most men in America kind of are. And so, like, this is going to sound funny, but I would look at my 8-iron and I would see, SJ, or I would look, and I knew that the gentleman that you had on here that did the podcast, that's kind of an accountant. And I think he had a sister or a sister-in-law that maybe got sick.
He's in the financial advising world, but Nathan Snar.
Nate.
Yeah.
So I knew he had contributed, and he doesn't know me from Adam. And and I knew JD had contributed, and he's apparently my mortal enemy. And all these people I knew, Cindy and Shanna, and then I had learned that Dan and Laura and, Ryan had contributed. And so then I would look at my 8-iron and see SJ's face, or I'd look at my 3-wood and I would see, your face having taken the time to organize this. And it was overwhelming. Like, it's hard to explain, but like, even when we were on the 3rd and 4th hole after we'd sort of gotten into it a little bit, every time I would see my bag, it was kind of like this person thought about you. And that seems like a super simple, just like, okay, so they thought about you. But I don't know, it was kind of, if we're going to go vibrational, at a totally different harmonic level to like kind of reverberate with your, inner sanctum, like your heart and the connection between your heart and mind. And it hits different, right? Like it genuinely is like, you feel seen in a different way. And I think that's all any of us are trying to do here most of the time, is to feel seen. And so that was something that, not duplicatable really, but makes you feel seen in a different way that is very, I don't know. I guess makes you feel more connected to your purpose.
Live
in the new studio.
Live here in the studio. All right, so we have a bunch of questions that came through on Instagram, so I'm going to kind of rapid fire through those, and then we're going to get into like deep conversations.
Well, I think you need to clarify first, because we've been trying to get this podcast together for
years.
It's been a long time. You've been incessant about it.
Yeah, and so it's taken me months to get you here.
Pretty much. So, I'm just asking, what's the dire need?
To do a podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, I just really like it with Man Games to talk to everybody that comes here. Because our idea is separate from Man Games, our podcast idea.
Right, I know, yeah.
All right, you ready? Here we go. Would you rather...
Are these the Instagram and they're intentionally rapid fire? Like, do I have any
No,
time
some
to
of them
think
you can go deeper into them.
Okay.
First one is, would you rather be 8 feet tall or 4.5 feet tall, and why?
Oh, 8 feet.
Why?
Because there's a stigma behind 4.5, and there's going to be a lot of things I can't do.
I feel like there's a lot of things you can't do at 8 feet too, like fit in a car.
I know, but imagine how good of a volleyball player you'd be.
Be dominant.
Golf would be tough.
Would be tough. More likely to exist, Nessie or Sasquatch?
Okay, we're going to go semi-deep with this one, because I think my initial reaction would be Sasquatch, because, I don't know, it seems like there's more verified fringe stories that's actually been
encountered.
Sort of. Yeah, thank you. But in the world of the ocean, we've only seen / discovered / been to like 1/8% of it. So I think there's more likelihood that an underwater creature could slip by without us noticing.
So not necessarily in that.
Not in Loch Ness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the ocean.
I suppose I just extrapolated to the oceans, didn't I? But I'll stick with it.
Okay. How was the culture shock moving from Idaho to Utah? What did you do to adjust?
Actually, quite hard, I would say.
It's important to understand where in Idaho you were from, because your town had like 13 people in it.
So my mom did grow up in Wyoming in a city of about 98 people. So I think she felt at home in Shelley, Idaho, which is where I'm from.
Home of the Russets.
It's true. Our high school mascot is, in fact, and I don't know if people don't cook enough, they may not know that there's like Yukons, Golds, Reds, and Russet Burbank potatoes, which is funny. I had to discover that Japanese apples that actually have russeting on them, that the name comes from that like what do they call it when they finish a vase and it like crackles on the outside? It gets that like pattern that they treat it with, and then like the outside skin crackles. But that's what that russeting on fruit is. So it's russeting on apples, russeting on potatoes, and so that's why that particular one is from. Anyway, Five Guys makes their fries with russets, and yes, it's our high school mascot, which is funny because everybody would get confused because our painted mascots on the wall and even our like live mascots outfit looks more like
A turd?
Well, luckily, no. Not that this is much better, but like a peanut.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be like a peanut with scrawny arms, because you even kind of have that jelly bean shape to the mascot usually. So people genuinely had no idea if they were not Shelley Russets themselves. So the first thing I noticed when I moved to Utah, because, you know, Salt Lake was the closest metropolis to the farm that I kind of grew up on and near.
Because Salt Lake's, what, 3 hours away? And then Boise's
Correct.
like 3.5, 4?
So Boise's about 4, and the roads just aren't as good. I-15 is just kind of a fast, straight shot. And so we would come to Salt Lake for big city type things, but I didn't realize that that was why we were coming, right? That there were some things that were reserved for the big city. But along with that comes more opportunities for jobs, but also there is a lot more concrete. Like that was the first thing I noticed. You can't, I mean, off the side of the road, there's no such thing. It's more concrete, and homes everywhere, it's concrete. So that was, I remember thinking vividly, like in my first two years, like there is far too much. I guess you just say lack of green space, but it's everything, right? Even after it rains, when you're in Shelley, you smell, like whether it's the grass on the side of the road or trees that are somewhat nearby, or frankly dirt, because there's mounds and mounds of, and fields of wheat and potatoes. But it's, here you smell sidewalk. So whether that's sewer or whether that's the oil that people's cars have left behind on the roads, it just was, that was hard to get used to. And I don't necessarily love it, but then once again, there's no way around it because I can't, there's not as many jobs in Idaho either. So, still getting used to it, I would say.
After
unfortunately, yeah.
14 years or whatever it is.
And it's funny. So people might not know this. So everybody in Shelley, because we're the Russets, you get an entire 2 weeks off. And I don't, for the potato harvest. And I don't think that's that odd in agricultural areas, whether it's the cranberry harvest or the plum harvest, or the pea harvest, even for that matter. But in Shelley, everybody, the whole school district is closed for 2 weeks straight, right around the potato harvest.
Which is when every year?
So it's late September to early October. And it is kind of an interesting thing because that russeting actually, I don't know why we're getting into agricultural lesson today, sorry. Potato plants actually are killed before you harvest them, like quite a long time in advance. And the russeting on the outside of the potato actually develops at that time. So after the green part is killed, the russeting happens to the potato while it's still underground. And the reason I say that is because it gets really close to a frost, because they wait as long as they can to make sure that that russeting is nice. Because as they come out of the ground, they're bustling up against each other and they're getting dumped into a truck. And so if it's not fully mature and fully developed, that russeting will peel off. And when it does, then the value of the potato goes down because people in restaurants like to see it look like a potato. Whereas if it's got, white spots as well as russeted spots, people, don't like it as much. So it doesn't sell for as high.
So the russeting, explain that. Is that just the outer coating of the potato?
Outer brown, that looks kind of like like a webbing almost on the outside, the brown webbing. That is russeting.
And before that, it would just be like white?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of white with a general. If you've seen gold potatoes, that's probably what they would look like in general. And there can be spots, but it develops and gets darker and gets thicker and essentially sticks to the flesh of the potato more as it gets. So they're pushing the frost, right? Because they wait as long as they can, but then they have to get them out of the ground before a hard freeze happens. And so it's always like, and that's in early October in Idaho, that's when it starts to freeze. So they actually are always really pressed to get them out of the ground fast. It seems like it's always, and then it rains. And so the 2 weeks are usually not very fun, but I would go back. So when we first moved to Utah, I was not doing well, meaning I wasn't making very much money and was just in a start out job, right? So I would go to Idaho to work for the farmer that I worked for before I left, just when I was growing up as a teenager and moving sprinkler pipes and stuff like that. So I remember, and this was part of it too, people don't realize, and it kind of makes me sad, especially with the release of the James Webb Telescope. There is so much light pollution in Salt Lake City, like you cannot see stars. And I remember I would lay in the back of the potato truck. They're huge. They're like 10-wheel. And just like, sometimes you have to wait for the tractor to like say, hey, come over. I'm going to put potatoes, in your truck now. It's a whole thing where they're going as fast as they can. And so sometimes there'd be 5 or 6 minutes when I could kind of go back there and lay down, and you kind of dig until midnight, 1 a.m. And so a lot of the hours are after dark. And it was that same kind of feeling, like it doesn't feel claustrophobic. In a weird way, I think the concrete of the city kind of does. And just not having like dirt, or not even having the smell of dirt, which is probably subconscious for the most part, that you're smelling road and exhaust versus dirt and trees and grass. But the stars was a big one too. Like at night you go outside and you can actually see the Milky Way. You can't see the Milky Way in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And those parts have been hard. And granted, I'm not outside at night all that often anymore, but all those things kind of make me sad about the transition to the city.
Wow.
Yeah. And my daughters, I kind of feel bad for them, right? And even your kids, they have no idea that they're stars, or that
how many
have
stars
to smell
there
like exhaust for 6 months a year.
So I've told you this before, but I had really, really good friend who was born and raised in Firth, which is Shelley's, well, they think Shelley's a rival, but Shelley's quite a bit bigger than Firth.
Yeah.
So
once upon a time, they were about the same size, but yes, you can't say the word Firth in Shelley without raising blood pressures. Yeah. It's pretty bad.
So I went to visit him. This would have been 12 years ago or so in Firth. And so he gave me a tour of Firth that lasted
8 seconds.
It was really cool though to see all the farms. It was really cool that you could just drive for 5 minutes and then you're out in the middle of nowhere and you can go shoot shotguns or you can go do whatever. And then he took me into one of those potato cellars.
Yeah,
they're like the size of a football
they're
field.
Huge.
And then potatoes that are stacked 30 feet high, and it was amazing.
It's full.
And they're huge. They're huge because I go to the grocery store and I buy a sack of potatoes. They're all, I don't know, the size of a softball maybe. And then these were just bigger than a football. They were massive.
I know. I try to tell people this story, but part of digging potatoes out of the ground, if you think about it, what they actually do is they have conveyor belts that are not solid. So they're like chains. And so dirt can fall through, but potatoes that are big enough will stay on top because they don't fit through the chains. So what they actually do is they dig up the whole swath of earth that the potatoes are in, like for like 15, 20, 25 feet. They just get a big shovel, if you will, under it, and then they just pull it with a super heavy duty tractor, and then they drop the dirt but keep the potatoes. Every potato that you buy, like in Costco and most grocery stores, like sometimes you'll see those bags of potatoes that are quite small. I kid you not, every tractor I saw dropped those back into the soil because they weren't like worth picking up because you couldn't sell them for that much. And so it wasn't really worth the time or the fuel to, if you will, go slower or whatever. And so it just always makes me laugh. Growing up, I always got kind of potatoes for free because I was either working on the farm or had a neighbor who was a farmer, and everybody's pretty nice about it if you ask, and everybody just, potatoes are everywhere. But genuinely, like those bags of potatoes are free. They're sitting in the dirt. You just have to walk by.
Well, it was like
Anyway.
the buddy gave me a bag of potatoes and it was so heavy and it was like 3 or 4 potatoes. But they were just so big and they tasted different. They tasted better. In
they
my
do.
opinion.
It was
awesome.
funny because for a family of 5, I would only peel a lot. I would only peel a potato.
Yeah.
And like here you have to peel 7 or 8 to try to feed a family of 5. And even then you might not have enough. So it was just a different beast.
Wow. Didn't know so you're welcome everyone. You now know
potatoes, and they
potatoes.
come in counts too, which is kind of how many will fit in a box. And so, the big, gigantic, and they're no joke. They're really this big and have a lot of water weight.
You got to show the camera because they couldn't see the.
I don't know. I mean, this is about.
They're like a football. They're like a football size.
And and quite heavy. They have a lot of water. Anyway.
All right. Next one. If your life depended on you winning a board game, what board game would you choose? The opponent is chosen at random.
I've been into chess lately, but I am terrible. And I mean, I watch a lot of people, so that would not be it.
I feel like with chess, though, well, I guess like board games in general, if you were to pick a random board game from America, then there aren't a lot of people that have played it.
Right.
I feel like chess is a relatively popular board game.
Yeah. So it can't be a card game, right?
You can make it whatever you want.
Well, I will give a shout out to Grandpa Beck, who makes a game called Skull King.
Yeah.
Have you ever played it?
Uh-huh. Yes, I have.
So I grew up playing a version of it. And so trick taking, making bids, trying to win your bid is something that I just probably have a decent amount of practice at. So I'll say Skull King.
Do you know how to play bridge?
No.
I have no
Do you know how
idea.
to play hearts or spades? Because I
No.
don't know how to play those either.
No.
You
But I
didn't learn
did.
from...
The gal that I interviewed, the
Right.
105-year-old, she plays bridge. And so she explained it to me, but I did not get it. So I watched a
Yeah.
YouTube video and I did
Still
not
didn't
get
get
it.
it?
I was so confused by what was happening.
I played Rummy once, which is kind of in that realm of games, I think. And it was fun. But there's also, it's funny because a lot of these games have now kind of gotten a modern take on them because really Rummy is phase 10.
Yeah.
But people just don't know it. Anyway, so.
Well, Grandpa Beck has one that's Reign of Dragoness.
Okay.
That I think is similar to that.
Oh, okay.
So we got 3. That was kind of our Christmas gifts this year was some Grandpa
cool.
Grandpa Beck.
Yeah. Skull King's a riot. But I also kind of grew up playing it. If I hadn't grown up playing it, I think I'd be overwhelmed for like, because there's kind of games within games, and then some of the different cards are like weird. Like if you haven't
The whale.
played, but having played trick taking games a lot, it's really cool. It's really well
Nice.
done, actually. I like it.
I like it.
Yahtzee would have been my second guess, just because it's kind of random and fun.
That's awesome. Tips for aging. How do you look so good at your age? Are you natural or are you using PEDs?
I would love to know. Is this John
This is
or
JD.
JD? Okay. I think he looks better than me at this point. Like after
JD
his
went on a
weight
fitness
loss,
thing,
He,
and he
did.
looks
He's on a
great.
tear.
Yeah.
He there was a time when I think it was like he even said the very words. He was like, it's just about establishing a routine.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time when I had a pretty good morning routine, but it's gone to hell in a handbasket with COVID. So
You
but
still
thank
look
you,
great.
JD. Well, I
Plus, you're diverse. I mean, you ride bikes, you
There was a
lift
period-
weights,
yeah, there was a
you
time.
swim.
don't feel like it anymore. So
Yeah.
and now that I mean, because we've been with Travis, and
Yeah.
JD was making fun of him, although trying to compliment him as JD does in his backhanded way.
He doesn't have a
And
backhand.
so true, just tomahawks. And but he was kind of saying, Travis and you are the same age, and like you guys are the same. Travis is much more fit than I am at this point. So anyway,
Just different.
once upon a time.
So are you using PEDs or are you natural?
I mean, he knows the only thing that I use, which is the bucked up, which is not even really a good thing. I would say that, in fact, I've been reading something recently, I think it was from Andrew Huberman, who talked about, I think, caffeine probably speeds aging a little bit, like especially if you take enough or it never leaves your system such that your sleep is now impacted because you have essentially too much caffeine in your system. So I'm probably anti-aging, if there's such a thing.
So when we first met at work, we developed a love-hate relationship over sports and competing against each other. This is just for our listeners, the 13 of them. And so we went and played tennis over by work, and it was a warm day, and you immediately took your shirt off. And I was like, whoa, I didn't think we were that close yet. But
And then you invited me on a golf trip
you
where
were
we slept
ripped.
in the same bed.
You were ripped. You were ripped. What is your favorite Chinese restaurant?
Chinese. Well, another shout out to Idaho Falls, which is essentially the metropolis closest to Shelley. And this is kind of probably for my wife because they make like a sweet and sour chicken that the sweet and sour chickens that you have here, the sauce is kind of rosy red. Almost sometimes it's even volcanic red. Like it's a bright, should I be eating that red? Anyway, and in it's the only place we have found, but like their fried rice she really likes. They have a pork and seeds. It's kind of like classically good. And I think maybe just because I was raised on that version, right? That's what we think is the best. And even though maybe, but it's really, really good. And so she likes the sweet and sour chicken there, and then the pork and seeds, and she thinks they have the best fried rice. So it's called Hong Kong. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like that's her favorite restaurant, Chinese restaurant. Is that your favorite Chinese restaurant? You've got a Dragon Diner right by you. Have you ever been to Dragon Diner?
Yeah, I'm going to be crucified for saying this, but it's overrated. I've never been impressed by Dragon Diner. I've been there 2 or 3 times. It's very close to my house and very popular. So there's a lot of people who like it, but I've never had the magic dish there. I did go to, and I've only been once, and I don't know why I've not been back, but I had like a Kung Pao shrimp at P.F. Chang's that I remember being quite memorable. It was like the first time I'd ever had Chinese shrimp that they didn't overcook. And I think they even like blackened it with red pepper and black pepper. It was really good. It was kind of fancy and good. And they had lettuce wraps that were, well, yeah. I mean, I haven't, but like I said, can I make that recommendation given that I've only been there once? I don't think so.
Brandon has been to 3 Chinese restaurants.
Yeah.
All right, you get to play Pebble Beach in Augusta for free once a month, but for the remainder of your life, travel included. But it costs. The cost is that you will never be able to talk to Eric again. So, what outfit would you wear to Augusta?
That is the weirdest. Who asked this question?
JD.
Oh, okay. I thought I was going to be having to choose like of my children or something like that. No, it's just not talk to Eric.
It's like not even a choice.
What am I wearing to Augusta? I'm probably going to be wearing the white jumpsuit because I ain't going to be able to play like for realsies.
You're playing. You get to play it once a month for free. So your first voyage to Augusta.
Man
Games champion shirt, Man Games hat.
Puma and Adidas make really good stuff, so I would probably pick Puma and Adidas stuff.
Right.
Which they probably would hate me saying both of them in the same name. I think they're like at each other's throat competitors. Yeah.
What is the most mad or angry you've ever been?
Well, without having any repeats of my therapy sessions, there was one time when I can't remember why or how. And I don't know if it was like angry, but I remember kind of being like yelling at the top of my lungs. But I was also in the middle of a potato field. So, I mean, like, I did no good. No one heard, including God.
Sixth book of Harry Potter.
Yeah. I think somehow because I had a sport that I was not, or a practice, and my mom worked. And so whenever I would, like, typically if I wanted to go somewhere, I needed to make sure that I could like jimmy a ride from somebody else who was going. And for whatever reason, I was having to miss scout camp because I had a practice or an obligation that I had to be to, and I wasn't very happy about it. So this is the first time ever voiced, so not that that's...
One of the questions is what's something you've never told anyone?
Well, this kind of qualifies for both.
Killing 2 stones with one bird here.
So I was in the middle of the potato field, and I actually, because there's pretty much only one street in Shelley, especially in your own ward.
I heard they installed a stoplight.
Maybe it's just one of the blinking ones.
They did have a
four-way.
People
just pause and then they go. It's not. It's like a yield sign, but it's got electricity now. I remember seeing the like suburban leave to go to scout camp, and I'm like halfway through, this moving this line of pipe, which was just my job, and I saw them drive away to scout camp, the thing that I wanted to go and do, I guess, at the time, and so I just remember being like super upset about it and just kind of like breaking down and yelling and throwing fists around at nobody and then tripping over some potato vines, and like karma hits you real quick when you start to do that kind of stuff with nature. It just hits back. So, but I remember that.
It's like a Kevin Bacon and Footloose punch dance in the middle of
a
potato field.
Luckily, without the musical, I didn't do that part.
Have you ever punched somebody in their face?
No.
Or fought somebody?
Mentally, maybe, but no.
Yeah. Your favorite Japanese teammate?
We gotta go back because I'm having some other thoughts on this. I know these are supposed to be rapid fire.
Fighting people or angry?
Fighting people. I think there are times when
you seem like somebody who would fight somebody.
Really?
But you're like a soft-hearted person.
I seem like somebody.
I told you,
who would
like when
fight
we
somebody.
first met, it was definitely like, oh, resting bitch face is happening here.
Oh well, yeah.
And
I mean,
you
I have
look
that
you look angry and
all
like
the time.
you look really
Yeah.
tough and you're swole and you're big and you're athletic. But then you're just super nice to everybody else. To yourself, you're not super nice.
Yeah. Well, okay. Where I was going with it was, I think I grew up sort of being taught to avoid confrontation. And so that's probably where that comes from. Clearly not with myself, as you just pointed out. So there's a lot of rage battles maybe going on underneath the surface. But I think that my wife would find me more attractive if I actually would fight somebody.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. So I was going to ask you like about Caitlin, or sometimes that anti-confrontation, I think probably has hurt me, like along the whole nice guys finish last. Punch somebody in the face and Mario wins the princess Toadstool at the end. I don't know. So anyway, sometimes I think to my detriment, I haven't punched somebody in the face.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not really in my makeup.
All right.
I don't know.
Got to be careful if you have this desire to punch people. I got to hang out with you less. I might be the recipient.
No, that's not happening. I think you want to hang out with me less anyway.
No. All right. Your favorite Japanese teammate from Man Games. Donnie doesn't count, even though Donnie's not Japanese.
John? Even though Donnie doesn't count. Donnie's Polly, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this leads me to another question. So outside of me,
John's a lot of favorite things.
you met John and Donnie at Man Games, the very
Yeah,
first
pretty much.
original one.
Yeah.
So take me through your Man Games teammates. What do you admire about them?
Oh, this year?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
You
oh.
don't, not me included, but like John and
Oh,
Donnie.
well, I'm going to talk about you too because you're on my team.
Well, first off, what do you consider your strengths? Because we've won it now together 4 times
Yeah.
in various arrangements. So what strengths are you bringing, and then how does the team work? And tell me about the teammates.
Well, speaking of that resting bitch face and all of that rage underneath, I probably need to work on all that because I think I could probably contribute more to the team if I wasn't such a downer all the time. Maybe it's more of a downer in my head. I don't know. The only strengths I bring, and I just brass tacks, like nobody plays a lot of volleyball on our team. And I'm not even good, but I play more frequently. So just with like knowing where to be and knowing what assignments to make and being able to quarterback, which is somewhat important in volleyball, I contribute a little bit there to where at least when we're playing, because it happens a lot, whether it's pickleball or volleyball. With Man Games, the whole point is there's probably athletes that are good at 2 or 3 sports, but they're not going to be good at all 8. And so we encounter that a lot, right? Where we go in pickleball, we've played a little bit. I mean, you and John are way up here. But a lot of the times we see people who haven't played before. And so just that knowledge of like volleyball helps us to where if we do face a team that hasn't played before, we're probably going to squeak out a win just with that little bit of like more experience. That I bring in volleyball. I know everybody says golf, but I don't think that that's true. When you're not a head case, you're an excellent golfer that could compete with anybody that comes to this thing. Obviously, that group that tied scorecard playoff with us had some good golfers and made some good plays. And I'm not.
I'm not a good golfer.
Yes, you are.
And then especially at Man Games when I'm running on like negative 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just kind of there, and so everybody else just kind of carries me along.
And that's one thing with golf too, that sometimes you kind of fall to your like practice or you fall to your baseline when there's pressure on and when you really want to do well. Because I've played with you lots of just friendly rounds on Fridays and Saturdays, and you are a good golfer. But maybe with that pressure and with no sleep, I don't know. I thought you did fine. And in scrambles, what you really need are opportunities to make birdies and eagles, and then you need people who can putt. And so I think we have 4 opportunities when that happens, and that's pretty exceptional because I've played a lot of scrambles where I'm the only legitimate opportunity that we're going to make the putt. So in that sense, I think we have a really strong team, meaning it's not just me on golf. I know that you like to say that, or JD and maybe Brady, one of our original teammates, might think that because I had to go in a 2-man scramble with each of them and we won. But
I just think you bring so much firepower with golf. I'm not saying that we don't contribute. Like Donnie and John, like they're putting their drives out in the fairway, and
Yeah.
every once in a while I'll get one, and then irons and everything else. But your danger potential or your danger levels that you can take aggressive shots that we can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that once again, the baseline for me, and that is important in a scramble, right? Like we are probably going to shoot even par by just showing up. And that's just playing with somebody who's scratched, because I'm going to get us in there probably, especially with somebody in the fairway. Like my worst shots are still going to get us in the vicinity of greens on par fours and par fives to where we're making, right? Whereas other people, they might have to make some great plays to make par. So that sort of separates. Just when you have somebody who's below a 5 handicap, it just helps with your worst plays are not really going to impact you, because you're going to have somebody who's more consistent than that and allows for then you to score, right? To get better opportunities to score. So, but other than volleyball and golf, I don't know that I really.
And pickleball and basketball.
I don't think pickleball.
Yeah.
I'm on the B squad, bro. I will say we did have a surprise.
You would do fine in the
Me
A
and
squad.
Donnie, we had a surprise spike ball event.
You did great.
Because we
in
are
spike ball.
not. I mean, like you and John are excellent, and so rightfully on Team A, and Donnie and I don't play other than this, and so, and granted, admittedly, we're encountering other teams that have not played spike ball too, kind of like I was mentioning earlier. But we had some teams that had played, and I think we got roasted by one team who had.
Weston's team was
Yeah,
great.
yeah. And they were kind of like us in pickleball, where everybody had played a little bit. And so then all of a sudden, when your B squads have not played before, we're doing better than them. But in spike ball, we got all the other wins, which we don't play. So that was just him being athletic. He makes smart plays. He hustles. I mean, let's talk about my teammates, because I love my teammates.
Let's do it.
So one thing So John, and this is the case with everybody on our team. You and I have talked a little bit about other dimensions, and people are going to think that I'm going weird here. But I think that there are a lot of things happening that we don't quite have, or let's just say that our earthly eyes cannot see. Some people call it energy. Some people call it manifesting to the universe, whatever you want to call it, aura.
Vibration.
Right? Sure, vibration. Thank you. Totally, 100%. Everyone on our team has a more mature, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily mature in the ways that most people use it. I mean, almost like their frequencies like go back to ancient times. Like they are kind of grand in the sense of their energy gives off at a higher frequency. Their hearts give off at a higher frequency. They're more of the light bringers, if you will, as opposed to someone who might be a dark soul that maybe hasn't grown over time. And I don't know, you see that manifested in a lot of ways. Like John, first of all, they're all very bright. All of them are very bright. And so, because there's times when I'll get sarcastic, and most of it comes from a pessimistic side. And like the wit that comes from you and John and Donnie is just, and once again, I think that those are a little clue to just the depth of character and the depth of soul, and the fact that they've done hard things and chosen selflessness at times in their lives, and chosen to, pursue ventures that made them expand their footprint, if you will, in this grand scheme of energies and frequencies. But like it shows up in a real way. And so in that sense, it's very, very comfortable to be around them. It's hilarious to be around them. It's also with energy and light, it's very warm to be around them. And that's from somebody who is probably the coldest out of the four. So it's a treat, right? Like John is, I don't know, it goes into all those things, like with the intelligence, with the wit, with the kindness, they think about others, but they also, when push comes to shove, on our football team, they used to call it like holding the rope. But if I wanted, like somebody would say, oh, if you needed to have somebody make a 10-footer to save your life or whatever, who would it be? And anyone on our team, like whether it's a 10-footer or a 3-pointer or whatever it would be, like I would trust all of them in a heartbeat to be like, yeah, I want Donnie to do this, or I want John to do this, and would have full confidence. And frankly, even if like they missed the 3-pointer, I would still be like, hey, like you're still the guy. Like
Yeah.
you. So I also think that people like that see at that level too. Like, and even though they might do it subconsciously, they deal with other human beings on that like deeper level. They see more, they treat, differently. And, so yeah, so when we finished Spike Ball, I think it was, no, maybe it was right before Spike Ball. When did we have pizza? Oh yeah, it was after Spike
Right
Ball,
after
before
Spike
the home run derby.
Yeah.
I remember just going and sitting with Donnie, and we didn't really say all that much. And I remember, like, this is going to sound super cheesy again, but I just remember feeling so confident and even strengthened by being in his aura and super comfortable, right? Like normally I think people would say that if quiet is happening, it's because they're introverted and they want to be alone. And if they're extroverted, they're going to think that quiet is not calming and is distracting and even uncomfortable. I couldn't pick a time when I've been more comfortable in my life than when I'm sitting next to Donnie, my teammate, and we're eating pizza and not saying anything, and maybe it's because we just had some success in Spike Ball, but I don't think so. In my mind, it runs deeper than that. And I've been surprised at that connection that we've all shared, and they've been willing to share because they don't know me from Adam really, right? Other than the first man games. And so for them to have that similar recognition of that like vibration and because even like you said, like with me running around with resting bitch face, maybe not saying something that often, but for them to still get a bead on maybe who I am at my core without us having therapy sessions, I think is because they live at that same, or at least they're trying to live at that same frequency, right? And I think it's just evident. And so yeah, if we talk specific sports, which I would love to do because I like stroking people's egos, especially when it's true. I mean, you've seen John. I'll go with basketball and pickleball. I've never seen anybody who, and granted, we haven't played like a lot of 5.0 pluses, which I'm sure that they come with that skill set. But like John just naturally, I think is a 5.0. And I know he's played a little bit more recently, but it's just because he reads the game well and he knows what to do. And he, in a similar way, maybe because he's kind of connecting with those other people on the court, he almost knows what you're going to do before you do, almost like he has like that premonition series. So when you're going to be running this way on the court, he's going to pretend like he is, and then he's going to hit it behind you, right? And he does similar things on basketball, like on that one highlight that you did when he wasn't on our team, but when he like faked the guy and then he pulled it back and then he shot the three. I mean, John can be quick and smart when he wants to. None of them make mistakes, as far as I'm the only one making mistakes on our team when it comes to basketball.
It's not true.
Well, I mean, but they don't, John and Donnie don't have turnovers and they follow them. Well, and I'm not sure that they are. I think Donnie's probably a shooting guard from his days. Was he a 2 or a 3?
He's a point guard through high school.
Oh, he was?
And
Okay.
then into
he gets
college.
an opportunity to be more in the shooting guard role, at least on our team, because he's mostly catching and being a dead eye. But John has that role. I mean, he doesn't turn the ball over, I don't think, ever. He's always making really smart decisions. He can play really man-up defense if he has to. I noticed, so in basketball, just like, once again, like really strong, like you want teammates like that, right? And in volleyball, once again, he doesn't play a lot. But like if I give him a good set, he does some serious damage, right? Like just athletically, like quite gifted.
Yeah.
And so my parents got divorced when I was pretty young. And I think that I sort of like navigated into sports to try to just probably as a coping mechanism, because it was something that I could do maybe because I have my own demons and trying to like ascertain my own self-worth. But if I could do well in sports, then all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm worth something, right?
Yeah.
Because I can make 3-pointers or because I can shoot par. And I can be hard on myself at times. And that's why I think I chose sports. But yeah, he's just generally good at everything.
I don't think I've found anything that John's not good at.
Right.
I mean, we've played so many different sports with him at all the different man games and everything, and I've yet to find something that he isn't.
Right.
Not just good at, but very good at.
Right. Yeah, he's able to achieve. And I think what I was going to say was I sort of dove into sports and wanted to win, and therefore that's where my competitive edge came from. But I've also noticed that those are the kinds of teammates that I want. That I think JD was even giving us an example this morning of somebody like as soon as they had mentally decided like, oh, I can't win this point, then they just totally checked out and stopped playing the point. Guess what? That's never going to happen with Donnie, with you, or with John. Like you guys all are, even if it's friendly, even if you don't want to like bury the other team, you want to perform at the highest level. You're competitive. And those are the kind of teammates you want when like, even though it doesn't matter and it's whatever, a man games amongst friends, that sort of competitive atmosphere amongst your like friends, your warriors, your teammates is quite ratifying, right? Like it feels very, I don't know, like it, frankly, like it aggrandizes each of us. Like our value is greater and we're stronger together because we know that they're not going to give up. It's a pretty
It does
cool.
feel like in all of these events or sports or whatever we've done together, whether it's you or John or Donnie, take pickleball as an example, and we're down 10-0. It seems like with all of the people on our team, I never feel like we're out of it. Like I never feel like we're entering any sort of athletic competition and it's like, oh, we're going to get blown out of the water. Even if on paper we're playing basketball and everybody that we're playing against on paper looks way better, they're bigger, they're stronger, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're always in it. And it's just, I feel like we always have a shot to win just based off of that team chemistry that you've been talking about.
And we, usually have a strategy. Strategies might be half baked, but there's something. And I think oftentimes when you just even know the direction you want to be leaning, or the footsteps you want to take when you're trying to do something, that's better than like the aimless idea of just like, let's show up and play basketball. And we seem to do that well. I mean, even we were kind of doing that in the home run derby. And I thought we were going to get a little bit waxed in that one just because Nate was on the other squad and we knew he was going to crush. And then we ended up winning that one, right?
Yeah.
Just because everybody was consistent. Once again, just the athletic hand-eye coordination, if you will, it seems to sort of, and we want to win, right? We want to do well. And sometimes I think that's just because that's who we are. We're competitive, but competitive in the most friendly way. Like everybody is very, like as soon as that guy made that shot, I mean, everybody was just congratulating them and bummed, but like, hey, good job, guys. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so.
Yeah. Sorry we had to replay that on his podcast episode.
I'm pretty sure I didn't congratulate anybody. I think I had to walk off and go throw my fists around for a while, but all my teammates did. And that's all I'm talking about right now, my teammates.
So I've been asked this multiple times, and then I've told the story multiple times, but people are asking like, what was my favorite part of this last man games? And it was the golf clubs thing. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So take us through leading up to that, what happened, your perspective on it, and then meaning your club's getting stolen.
Yeah.
And then the actual day of.
I mean, everybody has like either lost something or misplaced something. And when it's a really valuable something, it's a super bummer. And you kind of, your energy is always drawn out towards like trying to find that object or thinking that someday you'll stumble across it. And if exactly that, it's draining, right? So, but it crosses a line, and I think everybody, unfortunately, in this day and age has felt it, where it wasn't their fault. Like it was legitimately just somebody maliciously deciding that they are more important than you. And so they're going to impose their will when there's sort of a right of conduct or a moral compass that we're all abiding by. And then when somebody sort of breaches that, it's like
you feel violated, I think. Yeah.
Whatever in Karate Kid when they do the leg sweep, right? Like you're just like, and then you're falling, right? It just is a very hollow, empty feeling. And as an overthinker, right, you kind of start to brood on the different aspects of like, well, what could I have done? And maybe this is a good thing, but eventually I'd always come down to like, they probably, but none of this would have happened if they actually wouldn't have done that. I would never do that, right?
Yeah.
I would never. In fact, I might go take it somewhere and make sure that it couldn't happen, that somebody else wasn't going to do it, right? To go take it to the pro shop and say, hey, just want to make sure that these are here for the person whose they are once that, once they come around or whatever. So yeah, it was a super bummer. And like, I mean, even for the first 15 minutes, I still bought into that. And this was after you had left. And
so, well, real quick. So we were golfing Mountaindale with some kind of work colleagues, friends of ours.
Right.
And then you came into the clubhouse.
Mhm.
Clubs are outside. And then you come to the clubhouse. You and I talk for a minute, and then I leave. And then you go back and your clubs are gone.
Right. So it was kind of awkward because I would never do this. I don't think I've ever done it before. But when you bring a client, not that you're trying to put on a show or whatever, but you're trying to make it comfortable. You're trying to make it fun for them. And so Mountaindale's parking lot is so awkwardly shaped that when I pulled up to their car to allow them to drop their clubs off, well, like trunk to trunk was my car over here. And I thought, oh, okay. As an overthinker, I'm going through all these scenarios in my head and I'm like, okay, well, I could just like go and like linger behind his car while he drives away and then go and put my clubs in. But that felt weird. And then it was like, what do I do? Just drive and leave and then like come back after he drives away. Like I'm creeping on the situation. So obviously thought better of all of those. Eventually was just like, he's right here. I'll just set my clubs out while I can still engage with him, say my salutations. He drives away. And then I'll just come right back and that'll be that. So yeah, I went in to grab a drink. I asked the pro shop a question about something because I think we were going to be playing there. And then, saw you. We talked about golf swing for a few minutes and then I went back to my car. It wasn't terribly long. I didn't think. You were asking the guy questions about the lunch because that was coming up. Went back, didn't see my clubs by my car. And I thought, oh, that's odd. But I mean, I was gone for a few minutes. So maybe, so I went back into the pro shop thinking that maybe a bag boy or somebody had grabbed them and brought them in there. Like I'm still like buying into the naivete, right? And I'm not sure. And
by this time I've left. So
you're gone. You're like flying down the mountain. And I don't even realize a few things because I haven't expected that they've been maliciously taken, right? That my car keys are in there. I haven't even thought about that my wallet's in there. And there's other things that it's funny because I had quite a few golf balls in there as well as, divot tools that you use or yes, there was cash in there just because it seems like cash accumulates when you're playing games on the golf course or whatever. A jacket, right? Rain gear, obviously the 3-wood, which was important and was definitely the club that I was most sad about losing.
Well, and I think this is important to the story too, because people will go like, oh, it's golf clubs, right? And you mentioned like something you've lost or something is stolen. But for you, in your profession, I would say, because you're in the insurance world, but I wouldn't say that people hire you for golf, but golf is a big part of your professional life of taking clients out on the golf course and showing them a good time because you're so good at it. So it wasn't just that they took something that was really expensive or valuable from a dollar standpoint, but I think there was a huge sentimental aspect of this, right? Of like it's...
Oh, for sure. I mean, there was, more than just my bag, which my girls had just purchased for me, but I mean, there was a lot of, this is going to sound weird, but like I had collected golf gloves over time. And so I was, for whatever reason, I keep like the ones I actually use in my like home office, but I had collected different colors over time just from different giveaways or whatnot. So like I had a black one in there, a black Titleist that I've never seen duplicated. And I had like a cherry red one and they were like, and they collected over at least 20 plus years. Right.
Yeah.
So all these golf gloves are in there, haven't ever used them. And I'm a little bit of that person that likes to keep things nice. So they're like still in their original sleeves and stuff like that. And you're right. Like as far as value, probably not a lot. Maybe I could sell them for $5 at most because they're technically going to be used gloves, but it's sad not to have them anymore. And then you kind of, once again, you feel violated because in your mind, you had a plan for that thing and you were keeping that thing because you wanted to use it at some future date. And then all of a sudden, like, you're like, oh, well, I never should have made those plans because I just got heavily like foiled.
And people won't, unless they really know you, won't understand how you keep saying that you're an overthinker, but I don't think people realize how intense of a problem that really is.
Yeah, it's a bad
thing. You're afraid of this. So when we talk about the golf club and you mentioned your 3-wood, like that isn't just something where you went into a store and you bought a 3-wood off the shelf.
Let's talk about it.
That was like a 2-year-long,
way longer than
journey
way
to try
longer.
and find your 3-wood, and you finally did.
I've not gone. I mean, I don't buy clubs that easily, but no joke. Like people won't quite get it. I know you get it a little bit, but I went through like 3 different fittings and went through, I'm not going to say their name because it wasn't a terribly great experience, but a specialty club fitter to try to get this 3-wood. And I mean, this was so lots of people will know this, and this is one of those kind of sentimental things too, but because I'm so hesitant on buying new clubs, just because I feel like if I'm going to spend the money, I want it to fit. And once you get it at a high enough echelon for it to fit your needs, it actually has to check quite a few boxes. So I had this 3-wood that I had spoken to some club makers about because it rattled, right? So the inside of it, some sort of a glue piece had come undone. And I thought, okay, well, we'll figure out how to just get that glue piece out of there because the club still worked. So I took it to a 30-year plus club maker, and he's like, you know what? I've dealt with a few of those. The club is fine. It still will perform, but there's just this one piece inside that they like glued in a weird way. And so when it comes disconnected, it's trapped. So everybody would always make fun of this club that I had. And I had it for like 15 years because it was an R11. If you want to go back to when TaylorMade came out with, their different, they had R7s and then they had R11s. And so it was the first time when TaylorMade started having white clubs, and had it for forever. It worked really well. People would see me hit it and then they would stop joking because they'd be like, oh, you should never get a new 3-wood ever. But I always wanted one. And I joke you not, as soon as it started to rattle, which was probably in 2012, I had been looking for a new 3-wood. So we're talking 10 years, and it took me a while to even go to these fitting club makers, right? Finally, I go this year. I sort of had to buy a club as part of like the promo deal. And I was totally okay with that because I was like, I need a new 3-wood real bad. Like, I am happy to go somewhere where I'm going to have to buy a club. But yeah, long process. And so for it to be stolen after essentially a 10-year looking for it, as far as talking about overthinking, it's a real problem. And it was wonderful. Like, it literally ticked all the boxes, which is super cool that kind of a journey would lead to a club that I liked so much and that fit so well with my game that I could hit on a rope wherever I wanted. And so, yeah, for it to be stolen, especially after a 10-year search, was a super bummer. And so, as you know, like, because I called you eventually.
Yeah, I was like I was out of the canyon. So
Right.
Mountain Dell's in a canyon. I
You
was
were
out of the
going down
canyon.
215, probably.
You called me and you're like, hey, where are you?
Yeah. Well, and so I had gotten 2 text messages, I think maybe at this point where, probably not quite yet, probably on your way back up. Because I think it was about 15 to 20 minutes. Probably right as you got into the valley was when they were pulling into the Smith's gas station, right? Because I'm sure that they had taken it at about that time. So I had gotten a few text messages, but everybody gets spam texts these days or spam calls. And so I didn't even really look at them because I was obviously preoccupied with finding my clubs, but not thinking that anything malicious had happened. And then you show up, and Amex is pretty good about not spamming you. So when they send you a notification, it's usually for good reason. So I had received those. I'd received some US bank ones, and then the Amex app started talking to me. And this is about when you got there. And I just remember feeling like the wave of like, oh, those clubs are gone.
Yeah.
Like, they are not coming back. Because I had realized not only did they, because I thought even maybe somebody accidentally threw them into the back of their truck or whatever, or maybe they wanted the clubs, right? Because they were not crappy clubs. And then when I saw that all my credit cards were getting hit, and it took me 15 minutes to probably realize and come to grips with the fact that, like, these aren't spam. They're actually getting processed. They're actually getting shut down because of fraud, because they're running multiple transactions at the same register for lots of money. That was when I was like, oh, they're gone.
They're gone.
Then they're gone. Yeah. And so that was when I was in the truck with you, and I was like, oh.
Well, because your car keys were gone too.
Correct.
So you couldn't drive anywhere.
And so then at that point, I was like, oh yeah, those car keys aren't coming back either. So now I legitimately have to get a ride home.
Which is unsettling because now they have your driver's license with your address. They have all
Right.
of your credit cards. They had the cash. They had your car keys.
Right.
So it's not the most comfortable
Yeah,
experience.
because for a period of time, I was even after all this, I was still buying into the naivety and into the people do the right thing, because I was like, oh, well, maybe they just grabbed the clubs and then they were not going to come across the cash. And then even once I knew they had the wallet, I was like, well, maybe they didn't find the cash. Maybe they'll dump my clubs off to the side of the road, right? I'm coming up with all these scenarios that maybe somehow some of this is coming back to me. But coming to grips with that realization for a period of time, and then anybody that's done it, shutting down 5 credit cards when like over the phone,
Yeah.
it's a super time consuming process. It took like 2.5 hours.
Because you're on hold, and then they're like, "Okay, we'll send you a new card in like 7 to 10 business days."
The first question they ask you when you call them is like, "Well, can you give me your 16-digit account number?" No, I can't. Like, how this cannot be the first time you've had this kind of a phone call, and you're going to ask me for the number that just got stolen me to verify that I am the person that can shut this down. Just turn it off. I don't even care if anyway. So it was an ordeal, and that part was stressful. And then I was telling you this, but like if it was just the clubs, if it in fact was just a thing of value that could be replaced, like that would be one thing. But it's the violation. Are they going to come around and steal my car later? Because they can.
Yeah.
Are they going to, harm my family? Are they going to steal other stuff? Like it was, yeah. And one thing to kind of exacerbate the situation was the place they were spending the money, like spending my cards. Because what it looked like they would do is they would run a transaction oftentimes for a very small amount. I think just to see if the cards were like going to work.
Yeah.
And then the next transaction would be like $450 in gift cards is what the cops kind of that's what they've said is sort of the MO. So then at that point, it almost starts feeling like you're getting worked by an actual crime ring because it's very sophisticated. They know exactly what they're going to do to get the most out of it. They know everybody has access to being able to shut down cards like on a phone app or something like that these days. So they know their window is also limited and that there's things that would trigger the fraud to shut them down.
Yeah.
And so for them to already have all of that figured out and know exactly how they need to work it to capitalize was like, once again, it's just very like, oh, you feel pretty played. And then, yeah.
And on the way down, you had the alerts of where they were happening. So we were in the same parking lot that they were.
Down. Speaking of punching people in the face.
Right. It was like, what are we going to do? Like the two people that have never been in a fight in their lives are going to go and do things. So it was kind of like, I really hope I don't run into them, but I hope that they were in like an open bed truck and we could see them. But we never
That was the hard part is we had exactly the moment they were running a transaction that got declined. Well, one got approved and then one got declined at Harmon's. And so that's right by my house. So we went to the parking lot. And funny enough, they would have been there because right after Harmon's, they went behind Harmon's to like Ross's thrift goods store or whatever.
Singular.
And then
it's just Ross.
Oh, Ross. And then they also went to Five Below, which is in that Brickyard Plaza.
Yeah.
And they were trying the cards to see if they would open up. And then they would take them to Walmart. And then I think they were going to hammer for gift cards. And it's funny because I talked to somebody about 2 weeks after that who said that their wife had relayed a story where there were some gentlemen at the register that she just kind of saw, and they ran like some transactions, and I don't think that the woman had confirmation that in fact it had gotten declined, but like in a split second, and this all happened in like 10 seconds, I'm guessing the transaction got declined because they left everything there and they walked out, just kind of in a non-get caught kind of a way, and it's like, wow. I mean. So
it's crazy. And this was like a month before Man Games. So there was a selfish aspect of me where I was like, I need Brandon to still enjoy playing golf because we have Man Games coming up.
I think you just wanted to make sure we were going to like still be under par. So he's like, I need Brandon's drives in the fairway.
But I did get in my head. I was like, I think this would be a really cool opportunity to do something nice. And we've talked about this before with Man Games of I really want to make it something where we're doing good in the world on top of just playing sports and goofing off. So like this is going to be a really interesting opportunity. We'll see what happens. And so I reached out to several people. I knew generally what kind of clubs you liked. We've golfed a lot together. I play blades, even though I shouldn't be playing blades, and you've hit them. And so you're like, oh, these are good. So in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to get him the best blades that are out there, in my opinion, and the same brand that you had. And so I got to reach out to friends of ours, reached out to everybody that was coming to Man Games. I reached out to coworkers of yours and also coworkers of ours. And the response was awesome. So it was just, there's a lot of good people out there. So you were on the receiving end of some really crummy person who did something awful. And then at the same time, it was really cool to see people step up and do really cool things, and many of them didn't even know who you were, right? They were just complete strangers to you, but they were willing to do that out of the kindness of their heart. So the hardest part through all of that was making sure you didn't buy any other clubs between then, because we had another like scramble from a work perspective that we had to go to. So I was like, I'd call Andrea and I was like, hey, you got to make sure he doesn't buy anything because here's what's happening. So I kind of told her what was going on. And so
She
was
kept
like,
your secret. She didn't let it go.
yeah, she was just like, yeah, I had to tell him like, wait, I know somebody who might be able to get us a deal. So just wait. And then you still showed up to man games with a bag of clubs that were your old clubs. But so take me through the reveal. Did you have any inkling that this was happening? Because I was pretty, I don't know that I hit it super well. I was like, don't buy anything. Please don't buy anything.
Well, you hit it pretty well, but you asked me a ton of golf club questions, right?
Yeah.
Like, and very specifics. And you would have asked those anyway, but they were very much like, hey, unrelated, if someone were shopping for this exact club, exactly what kind of a thing would you want in it? That
Well,
kind of
we've
stuff.
done this a lot. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah,
feel like
we
that
have.
wasn't like a strange conversation because I ask those
Right.
all the time and you ask them back. Like,
True.
we have golf club.
But then you were like, well, I've got this 5-wood on eBay and I think we're going to get it kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was like, okay. And you had called and just outright said like, well, first of all, you joked and said, do you want me to start a GoFundMe for you?
Yeah.
And I was like, absolutely not. And then you just called and said, I would like to do something. Once again, that similar higher vibration. I feel like Donnie, you and John's brain kind of process those things even subconsciously at times. And so you had just made this decision like, you know, that's crummy. Like, and how could I help in a situation like that? I'd like to just do something. So you had called me and mentioned that you wanted to do something. So me being the overthinker Sherlock that I am, I mean, I at least was like, okay, I mean, he could be shopping for clubs. He wants to do something. I know Taylor Dance is going to mention it to you
Yeah.
because I called you and I'm like, what the H is this email? And you're like,
I
I don't know
played
how
that
you
off pretty
danced
well.
around it very well, but you did okay. But I still was like, there was an email and I wasn't on it. And that was fine.
So
but I
in
was
my
like,
defense,
why would Eric
so the
leave me
email,
off of an email,
the
right?
email went out to all of the people coming to man games, and the
Okay.
email said, we just got done playing at Mountaindale and clubs were stolen. So
Mm-hmm.
for the event coming up in a couple of weeks, please be careful. Don't leave your clubs out.
Yeah.
By the way, we're going to try and do this.
Yeah.
And so when you're like, why didn't I get this email? And so I was like, Brandon, do you need a reminder not to leave your clubs unattended at Mountaindale?
No, you did a good job. No doubt. But I had maybe had this indication that there was like some level of your GoFundMe happening.
There
So
were
I was
things
like,
happening.
So, however, I will say this, right? So through the reveal, there were a few things that, because that golf bag is hard to find. Once again, I had shopped for a while for it. The only place that I could find it at was like the Nike app, which there's so many people who like wait around. Like, I don't know. I've never shopped for shoes on GOAT, but I know that there are like teams of people who just wait for drops and then they just buy everything from the Nike app. So there's really not a lot of genuine inventory when it comes to that. And it's hard to get things off of anyway. So for the reveal for me, even if I did have some idea that that was like, my brain at least had calculated it wasn't a 0% chance of happening, right? I didn't think it was likely. I did not think that I was going to be getting clubs that day, but I've wanted a matching 5-wood for a long time, and I haven't bought a 5-wood in a long time. And it's funny because my favorite club as a high school golfer, which is probably where I became Scratch, was a 5-wood. And I've never, ever purchased a second one. And my old one is old enough that I had to legitimately retire it. And I've never had a new one. So I see the 5-wood that's matching the 3-wood that I already know is perfect. I see the golf bag. I know for a fact some of the people that have contributed to help just because I've kind of gotten an idea already. And I don't think you quite have grasped this yet, but the divot tool that you got that had bright colors, which you got just as a joke because it had bright colors, legitimately was an exact duplicate of the one that was in my bag that I lost.
Yeah.
It was
thought
a
about that when I
Stonebridge.
saw it.
It was a Stonebridge one, in fact, which is where I play most of my golf now. And then, just to see the brand new clubs as well as brand new wedges, plus the putter that I had wanted, which once again, I've been sitting on that decision for a really long time because you had one of the coolest things ever. So I'm going to shamelessly plug here, but on your way leaving EMI, you had gotten me a gift, which was a putter that we were both looking at. and might still be one of the nicest things somebody had no impetus that they needed to do it for and did it anyway. And I don't know. I just was super impressed and very grateful because it was one of the kindest gestures, other than obviously a complete bag replacement, given the unfortunate circumstances of my bag being stolen. So then from that moment on, because I think it can be hard to receive gifts a lot of the time. It can be hard to receive help. I'm not used to it. I'm usually the provider, and I suppose most men in America kind of are. And so, like, this is going to sound funny, but I would look at my 8-iron and I would see, SJ, or I would look, and I knew that the gentleman that you had on here that did the podcast, that's kind of an accountant. And I think he had a sister or a sister-in-law that maybe got sick.
He's in the financial advising world, but Nathan Snar.
Nate.
Yeah.
So I knew he had contributed, and he doesn't know me from Adam. And and I knew JD had contributed, and he's apparently my mortal enemy. And all these people I knew, Cindy and Shanna, and then I had learned that Dan and Laura and, Ryan had contributed. And so then I would look at my 8-iron and see SJ's face, or I'd look at my 3-wood and I would see, your face, having taken the time to organize this. And it was overwhelming. Like, it's hard to explain, but like, even when we were on the 3rd and 4th hole, after we'd sort of gotten into it a little bit, every time I would see my bag, it was kind of like, this person thought about you. And that seems like a super simple, just like, okay, so they thought about you. But I don't know, it was kind of, if we're going to go vibrational, at a totally different harmonic level to like kind of reverberate with your, inner sanctum, like your heart and the connection between your heart and mind. And it hits different, right? Like it genuinely is like, you feel seen in a different way. And I think that's all any of us are trying to do here most of the time, is to feel seen. And so that was something that, not duplicatable really, but makes you feel seen in a different way that is very, I don't know, I guess makes you feel more connected to your purpose and kind of reinvigorates you to say like, oh, I guess that, it always reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life when he wishes he were dead. And then my mom always made me watch that movie at Christmas, and it's a great movie, but like, you feel like sometimes you don't have an impact, right? When you're particularly alone or struggling or whatever. And so when you feel seen genuinely, truly, like undeniably, like there are facts here that show you're seen, is, I don't know, just I suppose those are the moments we're here trying to collect on Earth. So immaculately cool.
It's funny too, because on every hole and every shot, this is what people like, everything was in plastic. And so on every time you wanted to use a club, you had to peel the plastic off. So it's like the brand new first time this club has ever been touched or hit or anything on every shot. So I think that was kind of fun to watch.
And to unwrap a driver and to, unwrap a 3-wood, and even just the bag. Like I was giving a golf lesson today. And so like looking through the bag and seeing the clean pockets and realizing the effort and organization and thought. You being the mastermind, it doesn't happen without you, which was kind of one of the overwhelming thoughts about that whole thing. Like, somebody didn't just think about doing something. Somebody actually did something, even though they know they didn't have to. And for really no other reason than just to say like, hey, we're here for you.
Well, it was weird how it snowballed too, because initially I was like, well, let me see if I can find a bag. And then I reached out to some people, and then it just kind of, again, it snowballed on itself. And there were huge contributions by a lot of the names that you mentioned. And so I was like, okay, now I can afford a bag and the putter, or now I can afford the bag and the putter the woods. And then it just kept growing. I was like, we're going to be able to replace the whole thing. And then it got to where it was not just the bag and the putter and the woods, but it was divot tools, and it was gloves, and it was speakers and rangefinder. And by the end of it, it wasn't like your rain gear and stuff, but balls and everything else. Like you can go out and play golf with everything that we were able to put together with everybody that contributed. So it was really fun to be on that end of it too, of like, I just had probably a smaller vision. I was like, oh, I just
Mhm.
like to get him something nice because I knew you had old irons, and so I was like,
Yeah.
oh, worst case
Which
scenario.
are the ones that I brought. So
Right.
I didn't really bring. It was just like,
Yeah. So I was like, worst case scenario, he'll have some irons, but he's going to need a putter. He probably has a putter, but he's going to need woods and everything else. And so it eventually all just kind of came together.
and the wedges are, I mean, because to use a brand new club, because the very first time I hit that 3-wood, it was like, oh my gosh, I missed this thing. Because like it was a rope. Um, and you probably have to be at a little bit higher level to kind of really truly like appreciate that the club sort of does what you want in your hand, just like Ollivanders and the wands, right? Like it genuinely feels like, oh, this belongs in my hands because this works for me. Yeah, so it was also cool just on another note because there were times that people were involved and I don't think I had any idea, right? So, Shanna, who I was working for at the time and kindest person ever and wanted to help and I think helped in a big way and again was the one that got SJ involved. And so, but not a real big golfer, right? Even self-admittedly isn't a really big golfer, and talked about how there were a few times because I had a work event that I had to golf for as well that she and I were involved in. And so she was like, oh, well, I can, you can borrow this guy's clubs when you're going up there. And I just was like, man, this is super bizarre. Why would I want to borrow? And it was because you had talked to her and you were like, he needs to not get his own clubs before this
Shanna,
thing.
don't let him buy any clubs.
And I'm like, man, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use their, and then we ended up going to that one, you and me together.
Yeah.
But just hilarious, right? Because SJ had kind of done that a couple times too, and I never realized that Andrea was involved in me not getting clubs. I mean, she probably didn't have that tough of a gig because I'm running around the house essentially denouncing humanity in general, and then denouncing
I'm never going to play golf again.
Sport, yeah, this sport called golf that has now brought me more pain than I can endure. So it's like I'm done.
Yeah.
This is the last I'm ever going to play golf. So
again, SJ was kind of my first person to reach out to outside of the people that we know in Man Games. And then she took it and just spread it like wildfire there in Cigna and everything. But it was funny too, because I got a call from Dan and when he heard what was happening, SJ actually had the connection with Dan. I didn't have his number or anything. And then she was like, hey, Dan wants to talk to you. Like it felt like it was almost like this interview, right? Because Dan's golfed with you a lot. I've golfed with you not a lot, but we've never
anybody.
But we've never been in the same place at the same time.
Right,
so I don't know Dan and he doesn't know. I think we met once on a golf course, but unrelated.
Sure.
And so he calls, he's like, hey, I heard this was going on. Super awesome. But first, like, I've golfed with him.
Are you getting Northwesterns?
He's like, I've
what
golfed
are you
with him
buying?
a lot, so I know what Brandon likes. What are you doing? And so I was like, oh, I'm getting this. And so he's like, okay, what shafts are you getting? So I tell him the shafts, and then he was like, oh, you know what you're doing. I was like, I'm wasting your time. He's like, yeah, good. I'll Venmo you or whatever. So just so
cool,
funny. It was almost like this little, he wanted to make sure that you were getting what's best for you because he was willing to do that on his end too.
Right.
And so that was really cool.
Right. I mean, because you or I would want that, right? Like if it was a basketball, or if in this case golf clubs, you would want to make sure that, hey, it's kind of specific.
Because we're picky. I'm picky about basketballs.
And once you get to that
shoes,
level, right, it's like it's kind of specific. And with golf clubs in particular, there's 3 or 4 different like nuances that you kind of have to get right in order for this to really like come off without a hitch. So for him to just even speak up to the point that he wanted to and he might not call it caring, but like caring enough to actually make that call to say, hey, like you're not going to Kmart to get a full set, are you? Like with putter included,
Dunlops.
Right? Yeah. And so, for him to make that call and then realize that like you were getting blades and you were getting Mizunos and you knew some of the answers because we had spoken. Just super cool.
Very cool. Well, again, that was my favorite part of Man Games, and winning's always fun. Again, the bonds that are made and the friendships and everything that happen are always great, but that was a good time.
Yeah, I know that this might have even been intentionally, but there's one clip in the video where ultimately I'm like putting my glove in the bag because I had a glove on, but now I had a new one. I'm not sure which order that was going in. But anyway, the videographer did not include like my shoulders and up. He just pretty much includes the bag and then me there. And it's funny because in that moment, like I know, right, what I was feeling. And it was like, I don't know, it was like hyperventilate, like I need oxygen, like kind of a deal where, I don't know, just so cool that it was emotional. I couldn't even like be by my clubs or like look at them because every time I looked at them, like I saw everybody's face who helped and I knew what that meant. And they might not have even thought that it was some big deal for them, but it was such a big deal to me. And then to have these things like the 3-wood or the 5-wood that frankly had been more than a decade in me either finding or wanting, was like too much. So like you'll even see me like I zip up the thing and I kind of walk away. And I think I walked back to the range just to be alone for a second because it was like I can't be by these clubs right now.
Well, I told the videographer, I was like, did he not learn anything from losing his clubs? You just like walked away and they're sitting there all by themselves. And so I'm like,
couldn't deal with these right now. I can't deal with these perfect, shiny, brand new golf clubs.
They get stolen at Mountaindale because he's left them alone.
I figured with like 80 of us that somebody would protect them.
Yeah.
Super funny.
That's awesome. That's super fun. All right, let's get back to some more questions because there were still some others. This question I think is interesting. We've covered something around this, but not exactly this. So what do you think is the most important attribute one can possess?
I think I'll connect a few dots we've been talking about, as well as I've obviously been talking about this vibrational energy. And I think that this is exactly what I'm probably at its most deep level seeing from my teammates, you, John, and Donnie. And that competitive nature, that do not quit nature, I think is the drive to this is going to sound very cliche, but like be the best you can be. And not the mind frame of like giving up when it gets hard or like not continuing to try because maybe all hope is lost, but fighting as though, like you kind of said earlier, like you could win at any moment in time, even if we're down 0-10. Mm-hmm. I think that humility and desire to improve and to be willing to maybe not be hard on yourself. I think that there's probably ways we can improve and continue that upward trajectory without being hard on ourselves. I haven't quite figured out how to do it that way. I think it's probably healthier, but I think I was always hard on myself because that was the only way that I could get out better results. And I mean that on all levels, right? Like, wanting to be a better father, wanting to be a better manager, wanting to be a better employee, wanting to capitalize on the gifts that I've been given, whatever those are, right? Whether those are swinging a golf club or whether they are, sharing kindness, or like in this case, you saw an opportunity to act and turn a tiny nothing into this podcast worthy moment of, sharing kindness, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen the one guy that's like, he cat calls, like, but does so kindly. Have you seen those where he's like, yo, girl, I'll bet you put the flash drive in the right side every time. Something like that. It's pretty hilarious, right? Like spreading kindness. That's something that doesn't get as much attention. It's not usually headline news. And yet, like, if there's stories we're really going to take with us, it's when people did great things to achieve, when people gave of themselves to give to others, right? Like, and that kind of a focus, I think, is one of the greatest attributes we can have.
I did have a question too that I was thinking of as we were going to do this. Is that we're coming off of the World Cup, so there's always the kind of the Messi or Ronaldo, and then there's the MJ or LeBron, and there's the Tiger or Jack, and so kind of this greatness or the greatest of all time or the GOAT debates or whatever. And so I was like, I wonder what Brandon thinks about greatness. Like what is it that separates the people that are in that conversation for the greatest of all time? What does greatness mean to you?
It's funny because I saw Ibrahimovic's definition of Messi and Ronaldo. Did you see it?
I didn't see it, but it's been
I saw an interview, where he was talking about it, and he said, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with this, so I'm putting this on Ibrahimovic, but he said that Ronaldo was like a trained product, whereas Lionel Messi was just like a natural. And that's kind of like talking about nature or nurture, right? Like, are you born with all the gifts that are needed to be excellent, or did you have to learn them? And I'm going to say maybe the person that had to learn them should even be given a little bit more of the nod, right? Because they didn't have them to begin with. Um, it's not necessarily my stance, but wanting to and being able to actually benefit others with that, um, I think is maybe really where it comes down to it. So I think my answer probably has changed because once upon a time where it would have been shooting threes or feats of athletic greatness that I would have identified as greatness. I don't know. It's changed. I think that this dream we call life, there's a lot of people out there that are on the unfortunate side of like a lot of terrible circumstances. I mean, mine, like I was going to be okay, even without the incredible kindness that I was shown, things were still going to be okay for me. And there's some people where that's not the case, right? And they're in hospitals too often. And I have seen people that choose selflessness throughout their lives more and more often and worry about others before themselves. And I'm not even really I'm not very good at it. I'm trying to be better, and I'm not always able to identify as far as like when I can take steps to action versus at least thinking about it. I know acknowledgement's probably the first step, so I'm taking baby steps. But there are people that I have been around, been in the homes of, that I would say have done that for decades upon decades. And it's not an easy choice. Like same with people who wake up and are just sunbeams of like just optimism and like Travis, right? Travis is a pretty upbeat guy and very kind and is thinking about others, but also is like thinking about himself. And he's able to find this happy marriage of how that like blends in his life. And he's got a pretty good balance, I would say. And I think being able to do that, right? Because the homes of those people that I have been in where they're choosing selflessly, but also worrying about their own health and being able to not pour from an empty cup. Because I think to be able to care about others, you have to be able to do both. And most of these people, I think, have arrived at a point where they're actually being able to like fill their own cup by giving away. Like it's this magical synergy kind of a thing, but their vibration is different. I don't know that many things that really impact us like while we're here on earth, but somehow thinking about giving to and caring about others raises your vibrational state, and it makes you more light, like more full. It changes how people feel around you, and it doesn't come easily either. I don't think giving at such a high level is a very easy thing for us to do. I think a lot of the time we think very selfishly, which most of us can remember when we were 5 or 6 and we wanted the toy and we didn't want to share the toy, and that's that. And we'll even go to our room after getting yelled for it because we are not going to share that toy. So my opinion's probably changed because I'm guessing there's probably athletes out there who maybe don't give that much. And because they have plenty, like they're very happy, they're fat and happy, they're fit, they don't have to worry about others, or at least it's not in their periscope to have to focus on at that moment in time. And those who do, I think probably arrive at a higher level of, well, hopefully satisfaction, but greatness when it comes to the things that maybe really matter.
And what's interesting is like from the athletic standpoint, we only see a little bit of that life, right? And it's hard to imagine what they're going through.
Sure.
If you walk down any street and you can't have any time to yourself. And so they are in that constant pursuit of me time because they just don't get it.
Right.
And that's why I think like in my mind, Roger Federer is one of the greatest just people of all time. Not only was he the best at his sport for such a long time and arguably the greatest of all time, but just what he is as a person is just really cool to watch and witness.
And I don't know if it fed off of each other, because at first I remember when Rafa would have that same humility and that same complete congeniality towards his opponent to say like, boy, I wish we could split this because we both deserve this. Like those kinds of comments first came from Roger. And I almost thought that Rafa was learning from him by doing that at first, but they both have an ability to, right? Because, I mean, Novak Djokovic is great too. Potentially, if he continues, could be the greatest ever. And like, he doesn't have that Roger gift or that Rafa humility where like they look like a behemoth on the court because they have that no quit spirit. They have that I want to get better. They have that. And yet then afterwards, I mean, as selfless, like when he went into that ball boy camp and was hitting with them, like even though he was semi-injured at the Laver Cup. And I think it was you that was telling me at Wimbledon, I think he buys pizza for all the ball boys and ball girls and like hosts a party where he attends every time. And that doesn't ever make the news, right? That he's allowing himself to hang and chill with the ball kids and you know, and he doesn't have to do that.
Yeah, I think like, and Nadal, I think he has that as well. He was always hindered, in my opinion, especially early in his career, just by a language barrier, right? Like it took him a while. And even now, like he doesn't speak English like Roger does.
Sure.
But as he tries to articulate himself, he still has that, I think, kind of that big open heart, which is really neat. Which is really cool.
And they're just, because you see the Ibrahimoviches of the world who are like, did you hear the story? One of them shared it there was a clip or something like that where he arrives in LA to play for the LA Galaxy. And as a kind gesture, like he received a LeBron jersey. So he signed it and sent it back. Like that's how Ibrahimovic centered Ibrahimovic is. I mean, he thinks he's, you know, God's gift. And although they recognize their place in history, that's never, ever been any sort of vibrational off-giving that Roger or Rafa have ever right? They are just as talented as they come and yet so humble with that gift that they've been given. It's pretty cool.
There's a conversation I'd like to have, if you're willing, that you've had with me before that I think is really important for people to understand. We were on a hike because we were at the EMI where we worked together. There's a hiking challenge. So we were on a hike. I was talking about golf, and I was upset about my golf performance, about how you know where the ball's going every time. Like even with your driver, which is something that has the biggest kind of fan of potential problems, you're so accurate with it. And at the time, I had no idea where mine was going. And then every aspect of the game and putting. And so from an athletic standpoint, I think most of my life, a lot of things have come relatively easy to me from like, oh, if it requires hand-eye coordination and if it's throwing or hitting or something, like I can figure it out. And golf is one that I don't feel like I've ever mastered. And so you kind of told me about, and we'll dive into it, about how many lifetime rounds you've played versus the lifetime rounds I have or the average person. And so whether that is golf, an athletic event, a job, like doing something from a professional standpoint, I think that it's easy for us, and maybe it's more of the millennial generation, to be like, oh, I think I deserve that just because I'm me, right? Like, I can do that. I'm just as good as this person, even though I haven't put in the hours. I feel like I should make as much money as them. I feel like I should have as much responsibility as them, whatever. But I think that your conversation around lifetime rounds is really, really neat. So can you kind of take us through that again?
Absolutely. So, yes, people, when I'm golfing with them, and back to it being part of my job, right? I mean, certainly golf is part of insurance a little bit, whether that's because we're asked to sponsor. Sales. Yeah. And sales in general, you're probably right, where, you know, a few different entities just in the industry are going to host a few scrambles, whether that's just customer outreach or whether it's a sponsorship kind of a deal. You have, you know, 5 or 6 gratuitous scrambles that you're going to play every year. And, you know, everybody wants to show up and feel like that they aren't embarrassing themselves. And yes, I don't have to worry about that, but I certainly get paired with people like that, right? So when I talk to them about how they purchase clubs or when they purchase clubs or when they started playing, right? If they say, oh yeah, I started playing when I was 26 and, oh, I don't know, I've probably played 3 times a year since then. And I think that probably means that some years it's 6, but I actually also think that some years that's 1.
Yeah.
Legitimately. So if you multiply even 10 years by 3 rounds, right? Like it's 30 lifetime rounds that this person has played.
And there's a difference between rounds and scrambles.
True.
Which I think is an important differentiation. And then you've taken it a step further of tournament rounds. Like those are 3 very different types of golf.
And to add a 4th one, how many times have they legitimately just gone and practiced? Like they didn't go to play a round of golf because, as with most things, playing a basketball game is like being able to go and make a 3-pointer in that game is very different than being able to go and practice 3-pointers. Now, I think the one can help you do the other. But how many times have they legitimately just gone to hit a bucket of balls, and not just to get rid and get through the bucket of balls, but that they were actually doing something and then working on something to improve it, right? So like balls hit, how many times have they actually done that in their life? Because when they're just playing around in a scramble, especially, there is no pressure on the line. Like these golfers come, they know that it's not like leaning on them for the scramble team to perform well. They've also talked themselves out of it before they've started because they know that this isn't their strength. They're not good at it. If they actually care, then they'll actually have to be disappointed when they hit a bad shot. So they're showing up and pretty much just like, I'm here to ride in the cart. Whereas, when you go and you're intentionally practicing and hitting a bucket of balls, or you're intentionally playing a round of golf trying to be better, or a lot of people know this terminology, they're trying to take something from the range to the course. And so they're implementing a new tactic or a new strategy to try to make it to where now their trajectory is upward, right? Getting better. Versus this is the same in a basketball game. Like I said, with our golf, like you and I have gone, when you have to play a Friday round with us, you're an excellent golfer. Like you don't give yourself enough credit. But I can't remember if it was Ben Hogan who said there's golf with your buddies and there's tournament golf. And there's really nothing in common between the two.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people, like I've seen it in billiards, I've seen it in golf, but like they're really, really, really good when there's no pressure on the line and they just have to hit and they don't have to think about it. But when it's a tournament and this is the shot that I have to hit right now, first try, no mulligan, like that's intimidating and our mind plays tricks with us. And so to do it, you're almost proving to yourself that you can do it when you have to, in the moment that you have to. And there's something that I think is quite addicting about that with golf. But actually, there's a pretty small echelon of golfers that even get to the point where they're willing to put themselves out there and join a tournament to say, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try to do this out when it matters. And somebody else is going to be counting my score and then still perform well. So, if somebody has played, like I said, 30 lifetime rounds with no practice, with no upward trajectory where they're trying to take something from the range to the course, okay, and 30 lifetime rounds times what, 70 shots around? Decent number, but not a gigantic number. Whereas...
And I even think if you take that even, because that's kind of, I would say lower, right? And that you say like me, like I really enjoy golf. I'm trying to get better at golf. So I do range sessions, but my yearly lifetime rounds, I mean, I would think like 2 years ago is probably when we went the most, and I probably did 12.
Yeah, between 12 and 20
12
rounds.
And 20 rounds for that year.
And we would go and we would do range sessions, which does matter because there's a lot of people that show up to these scrambles and they don't even go to the range beforehand because they think it won't help because they've already like conceded like, well, I'm not going to be able to get better.
But my point with that is like, that's okay. Now let's say that it's 20 rounds a year and I'm still going to the range. And then I'm looking at that and saying, why can I not play like Brandon can? Because there's 20 rounds is different than your lifetime rounds.
Right. And actually I started thinking about this. So when we started talking basketball and you were playing in your leagues, so I started right when I first moved here, I got recruited into a league where, I don't know, it was like, I was surprised, but it was like 15 officiated games-ish. And I realized, and I started making a comparison between like NCAA, and I was comparing these people that had played in the NCAA and also NBA players. And NBA players officiated games play 82 in a year. And I went back to my high school career and I realized that like at most I played 20 games a year.
Yeah.
So I hadn't even played, as far as experience equivalent, one NBA season.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of thought I was okay at basketball, right? I was a decent shooter and we went kind of far and I realized. And so that was actually what made me start thinking about lifetime rounds in the first place, because there was a period of time, and granted it was only during like a 3-month window, but how often were you able to go to the range and hit a bucket of balls during high school golf? Like it's a pretty regular occurrence. And that like was a big difference maker for me. I went and shot, I think it was a 9-hole tryout, and I was not good. I genuinely was going as a freshman because I was like, I like golf. I own my own clubs, and I get a free round of golf at a golf course I wouldn't normally get to play. And I shot like 50 in 9 holes. And somehow in Shelley, I was just good enough to make the top 10. And then just one season, which was only about 3 months long, of being able to hit range balls more or less every day, made a huge difference that by year 2, I was shooting, I think, low 80s. And so then from there, it was just, okay, well, now how do you go from low 80s to even better than that? And so that's for 4 years I do that. And that's a lot of...
Didn't you work at a golf course too?
So lots of tournament rounds. But then as a junior, I got a job at that same golf course. And I don't know, maybe worked for... It was probably 7 years legitimately. And so certainly in those high school years and before college, I mean, I was at the golf course from 6 a.m. and then I would get off at like 2 p.m. and I started taking clothes. So I would get off, go take a shower, go to the range and play till dusk, right? So you're talking range balls every day, 18 holes, if not more every day, for like 220 days, during the non-snowy season in Idaho. And, I didn't go every day, but like compared to somebody that goes 3 times a year, I win every day.
Yeah.
I mean, and was being able to make improvements and go to the
7 years you worked at that golf course? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So when it really came down to it, and once again, the tournament rounds, I do think count for like double, triple, maybe even quintuple. Because if you have a tournament round and you've worked hard enough to be able to perform when you have to, in the moment you have to, and all your system is stressed out knowing you have to, those go a long way to then being able to come into a casual round and being able to pull those shots off. But yeah, so I did a comparison once, and I mean, that's got to be 1,000 lifetime rounds versus somebody who maybe thinks they have 27 to 30. And they're like, oh man, how do you hit the green every time? It's like, well, I mean, and granted, once you get to a certain level, I'm not sure that somebody with 1,000 lifetime rounds is a lot different than somebody with 5,000 lifetime rounds. But in golf, and I've said this to a lot of people lately, the basic skill set to arrive at a place where it's not frustrating and you can actually make adjustments in your swing and get the golf ball to do what you want it to do, or when you see a particular thing happening that day that you can make an adjustment and get it to work, to have arrived, that's a lot. It's a lot of balls hit, right? To get to the point where you can make those kinds of adjustments with golf, just because there's so much going on in the golf swing and so much to understand. And truthfully, you can't hold it all, particularly in your head when you're doing it. So what that means is you need to have done enough dry swings to where you now are doing that thing you need to always do, but you don't have to think about it anymore, which a lot of the time is quite a few reps to get it ingrained, right? To make it a habit. So,
well, and I remember just whether this was 2 or 3 years ago, I had that goal to shoot a 76. So, and you were nice enough to go with me all summer and everything that happened with that. And then there was that day that at Stonebridge, and it wasn't even a tournament round, but every shot I felt like mattered, because I was like, Brandon, today's the day, I'm going for it. So every shot, I was like, this matters. And even going into the last hole, I was on pace.
You were at 70, weren't you? Meaning on the tee box. So you had 6 strokes to shoot 76.
Right. Yeah, it was a par 5, and I was at 70.
Yeah.
And I hit a perfect chip in my mind that put it. So I just hit, and even that, I think I was like a 3-footer, but I'm like shaking because I'm going to, because I'd had a chance earlier that year that I'd missed.
And that's what I wanted to talk about. Like, this goes back to the courage of being able to put yourself out there, to say like, okay, if I put myself out there, that means I might fail and I might show myself that I'm not as good as I want to be at this sport, even though I've been trying really hard. And that's, as humans, that's not easy to do. Yeah. Like, we don't like having to stare into the face of something that might swallow us, right? Particularly something that we don't want to be that way. So when we want to be good at golf and we want to work hard and we have done it, now we're like, okay, I've done what I need to do. It doesn't always mean that your goal's going to be achieved, right? So to do that time and time, like I know you wanted to sell your clubs a handful of times when you didn't reach the goal, right? Because you went out there and you were like, today's the day. And then sometimes the wheels would fall off early and then you didn't even want to be there, right? Because it hurts. It sucks. And so you stuck with it. And then all of a sudden when it happens, it's pretty cool.
But I think to your point, right, of like when things were sucking, golf for me isn't something where I can like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. Like I know where I'm screwing up and I can fix it. I'm not there yet with golf. In basketball, it's different because
Right.
we've kind of switched spots in terms of lifetime rounds. Golf, you're higher. Basketball, I'm higher. And
Way
so
higher.
we go and we shoot. And again, you'll have really good shooting days, but I think our baselines are different from a basketball perspective, just like our golf is different, because I don't even know how many tens of thousands of shots, hundreds of thousands of shots I've done in my life of getting up early every morning all through middle school, high school, and shooting thousands of shots. So to your point, like if I'm in a basketball game and things aren't going right, I feel like I can figure it out. Like I'm going to be able to work my way through this and still have an impact. Golf, I'm not there yet. So it's just a different, but again, I think this applies to all things in life of, again, there are people, whereas we're watching them on TV like, oh, I could do that, right? You look at these swimmers in the Olympics and you watch and you see the person who's taken like 8th place out of everybody and their body lengths behind, but you're like, they've put so many hours in the pool that if you or I were to go against the 8th place in the Olympics swimmer, it wouldn't even be close because of all of those rounds. And so I think there is definitely kind of a meritocracy in the world that people are trying to not have applied to them in certain instances because they don't understand that there is a significant gap in just being able to see it on TV and go like, oh yeah, that's easy. Or I watched a YouTube video on how to do a marketing campaign in HubSpot once. And it's like, well, that's not the same as doing a marketing campaign in HubSpot for 10 years. Like when that's your job. Right. So I don't know.
I what do they say? The professional has gotten it wrong far more times than the amateur has gotten it right, or they say the
one that I really like is that to be really, what is it? I don't remember the exact phrase, but it was like somebody who is good at something works so hard to where they can do something right, and then the master does it so often that they can't get it wrong or something like that.
Exactly.
The exact phrasing.
Exactly.
All right. You actually sent me some questions that I was supposed to ask the 105-year-old lady, so I'm going to flip them on you.
Oh, dang. That wasn't cool.
Did you ever have a moment where you felt you found your purpose?
Well, I think that I've been exposed to, once again, I'm probably at that acknowledgement stage of understanding that most of us, if we don't try hard, will be selfish and egocentric and move inwards and concentrate on things. Whereas if we deem it important and work really hard, we will care about others, be selfless, and give. And so I feel like I've had some painful experiences, because to do that, you have to recognize that maybe you've been very selfish in certain situations. Which
we've argued about this in the past, though, about selfishness
is this
and
your
selflessness.
Ayn Rand? I like these conversations a lot, actually. We could get into those. I agreed. And it's hard, too, because some of the books that I'm reading about, right, these self-help books, kind of, by the time you're done reading them, sometimes you feel pretty crappy because you're like, well, I'm not doing any of these things. Like, I am a terrible person. And so I realize that that's not exactly their goal, and maybe they just want you to read them because there's a difference between action and thinking about action, like we've talked about. And these books sometimes, I think, make you feel like you're taking action, even though you're still just thinking about action. And maybe that's how they sell. But I do feel better after I read them. And I feel like my knowledge is expanded on the direction that I should go if I ever get around to it, or if I, figure out how to overcome the obstacles that I'm facing. So, and I once had a boss who said, like, it's so easy to be nice. Like, if I can do something and be nice, why wouldn't I do that versus doing something and being mean or like being a jerk about it? And so, if anything, based on this question, there are times when I've had to ask myself, like, who do I want to be? Like, absent of all other knowledge in the world and all the shoulds and all the could haves and all the, like, other people's ideas of what we should do or who we should be or what's popular in the world, like really trying to peel back the layers and say, who do I want to be? Like, regardless of all of that. And the truth is I want to be somebody who tries to give and not consider themselves at the center of the universe. And that doesn't mean that there are things that I mean, I still have to concentrate on myself enough to have a full cup, but I've realized that there are gifts that I have as far as giving or as far as trying to help others or even dovetail better with their gifts so that they then become even more grand themselves than they would be without. And those are the kinds of realizations I've had where I'm like, I think that's my purpose, that if I lean into selflessness, which for me has not been and is not always terribly easy, but the more that I can get better at it, I will have even more revealed to me, or if you will, like I'll even have more gifts shown to me that I can continue to use to fulfill those purposes, I guess.
Yeah. When was the time that you were deliriously happy?
So, I mean, there were 2 times, well, my family makes me happy. And so, I mean, this one's super cliche. When both of my girls were born, I mean, and it's not even so much that moment as it is like later when you kind of are like staring into their face and like they're cracking a joke or they're doing something silly or they're even like being a little bit obnoxious. You almost are able to imagine your life if they weren't there. And like all of a sudden it goes incredibly like sad.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh, like this person's so important to me. And those moments make me deliriously happy, as well as, and this is only because this is part of who I am. There was one time when I had like the round 76 like you had, and I was practicing really hard, kind of putting myself out there. I'd already sort of admitted that I wasn't as good as I used to be with golf, but I was going to try again. And so I was practicing. It wasn't really paying off, as golf often doesn't, just because it's one thing is going right now, but then it goes wrong tomorrow, and then all the other things are going right, but then this one thing goes wrong that's never gone wrong before. Like golf's just kind of finicky like that. And I went and played a really hard golf course and shot like, I think I shot 4 under on the front. And one of the things for me is even if my irons and woods are going well, my putter won't be on. And this day my putting was really strong. And oftentimes my putting gets worse, as does most people's, when they are, like you said, you're feeling the pressure of wanting and needing to make it. And it was a tournament round. And I was just, all of them were going in, like all the work was paying off. So I'm 4 under, and then I go into the back 9. And now I'm like, I have a 4 under like round to protect, which I don't know that I'd been that far under at that point. Anyway, it was a bit of a mess, but I sort of like limped my way to only shooting. I think I shot 1 under on the back. And so, or even, or something like that, to where I finished around 4 or 5 under. And so, because I had a goal to shoot, I think in the 60s, and all of a sudden I kind of blew it out of the water. Granted, this course was a par 70, but I think I shot like 66 or 67 or 65. And I remember coming off the course, and that was kind of how I'd always built my value. So I realized it's built on my own paradigms. But like I had worked, and this is the only way I'd ever shown myself that I have value. And then all of a sudden I like did it. Like I did exactly what I'd been trying to do. And shot 67 and was like, I remember walking off the golf course and being like, I'm usually super pessimistic after athletic performances because I'm always jumping in and trying to be like, okay, what could I have done better? Where did I suck? How can I improve? And this time it was like, I just shot 67. Like I just like made everything on the front. And although I probably should have been penalized by falling apart a little bit on the back, I got a few breaks and didn't. And I remember thinking like, that was awesome. And I walked off and I didn't have any criticisms to say because I was able to just look at the end result. And funny enough, it happened again kind of 2 weeks ago. Like I haven't ever taken beach volleyball this seriously because it's kind of my other sport that, not that I'm great at, but I play more frequently. And I haven't videoed it. I've wanted to video it for a long time, but like
Dude, there's a plug for iRange Sports right here.
iRange Sports. Oh, I need to bring
this is
an
a little
iRange
this one
so I can set it up.
This one can clamp onto stuff. This is a girl games one. There's a man games one over there.
Because I could possibly spike that one into the sand.
They actually have bases, so I can show you. They're not in here, but they have a base that's kind of like a cross here, so you can set it on a floor. Or you could set it wherever you want. But
I need to.
I
Don't I
arrange.
have to put a magnet in my phone though?
Well, if you have a case, you can put the magnet. You can take the
Oh.
case off. Just put it in the back. You don't have to stick it on anything. Just put it under the case, and then it'll.
Does
sit.
that come with the magnet then, or do I have to go buy an Apple magnet or something?
No, it's not a magnet. You just need a metal disc on your phone, and then magnets on the pole.
Okay, where do I get the metal disc?
I have like 20 of them.
Oh, okay. So similar thing happened where I come off the volleyball, and I mean, it's anyway, I played really well. Like I didn't really make many mistakes. I have been working on it. I even was attending some like training sessions. And although my body's not in the shape that I would like it to be or that it used to be, my shoulder's been doing a little bit better, which is frankly your vertical and your shoulder are kind of the more important things in volleyball. But like I just made really smart decisions, and I swung and completely thundered a few balls, which in sand for a 6'2" guy is actually not, at least for this 6'2" guy, is not that easy to do. I'm not normally swinging very hard. Anyway, I walked off the court and I was like, once again, and this is so rare, that's why they like stick out like sore thumbs, but I walked off the court and I was like, I don't have anything critical to say to myself. And it was a pretty cool feeling to have. So those are the two instances where I felt deliriously happy.
Yeah.
Maybe because my negative voice finally shut up,
Which is
super cool.
It's great for me to see it from you. This is wonderful, because we've had memes or like texts that we've had in our group things of the guy. It was this last year on I think it was a PGA Tour where he hit a shot and it like hit the flagstick on a par 3, so he almost made a hole in one. He's like, I quit. Like he's all upset at the fact that he like hit a perfect shot. That's pretty much.
It's funny too, because when we played that round at the Man Games, I knew that hole was going to come back and haunt us, and you guys had missed. And I think I didn't have to make one on the par 5, but like 3 holes before that, everybody had missed the putt. So once again, those are the exact
3 huge putts right in a row.
Those are the exact opportunities where you're like, I have to make this. Yeah. There is no one's coming to bail me out. Like it's funny because I had this revelation once. I don't know. It was right before I got really serious, because I did play the Idaho State Amateur a couple times, and that's like, as far as the pressure's concerned, that's kind of, at least for an amateur golfer, that's about as serious as it gets. As is the Utah State Amateur for all the college golfers here. Like it's a big deal, and that's when you have to play your best, and there's eyes on you and stuff like that. And so, I come back and I played that tournament, and that was kind of the rounds that I would get. But when we played that tournament at Man Games, I knew that was the putt that I was going to need to make. And so I had made 3 in a row. I delivered in those moments. I had to make another one. It was the easiest one out of the 4. And I think I just got just a little bit nervous. And then that was the hole that lost it for us in the scorecard playoff.
Yeah.
Had we birdied that one, I think we would have had it. And I knew that was going to be the one.
It wouldn't have even been a scorecard playoff.
Well, yeah, true, exactly.
Which is funny, because I don't know if you listened to Weston's on here. I may have told you this, but there was on one of the par 5s, they played from the golds rather than from the blues. So they played a tee box back. So theoretically, they should have a penalty stroke.
2.
Yeah, 2 penalty strokes. So I don't know. We'll have to go back and revise the scores. When in your life have you felt like you were in the exact right spot at the exact right time?
I didn't know this was turning into.
What's her
name?
That's the last deep one.
Oh, okay. What's her name? The 206-year-old?
Kay.
Yeah. I was excited to hear hers. Well, no, we're throwing out all sorts of stuff that like nobody has heard before. So those two, the golf moment and the volleyball moment, right? Those are really ratifying, and just kind of when all the other voices go away, I think you feel that. But there was one time when, and it's funny because I have some cousins in Cortez, Colorado, and I really don't go see them that often, and it's a bit of a drive, and they're on my dad's side, and he, moved to Utah when I was in Idaho at the time, so I didn't spend all that much time with my dad after I was 11, and somehow I had a cousin that was going on a mission, and my dad was going to go over because it was his brother's son, right, that was going to be given the mission farewell. And so I said, yeah, okay, I'll go. So somehow I got down and went with him. And so we're driving to Cortez, Colorado, and I had fallen asleep in the back of the car. And, I pretty much just remember waking up. My dad had parked on the side of the interstate. I thought it was odd. And I was like, what's going on? And he said, I don't know. I think that maybe something might have happened, and he was probably preoccupied. So he gets out and he crosses the highway as a pedestrian. And I'm like, well, that's not a good idea. But I was like, I better get my shoes on. And this was back in the day. They're kind of coming back, but I had these really heavy, like Wingfoot Doc Martens, which are not great for traction. And I'll explain later why that's important. But we go to the edge of the road, and there is a road that has one of the rivers that sort of meanders around it right next to the interstate if you're going from Utah to Colorado. So that's clearly where we were. I've kind of Googled it since then, but nobody really knows this because we kind of just showed up and then we kind of left. But I looked down, and me and my dad are deciding, and I didn't realize this at the time because I'm kind of still groggy and waking up, but we were the first ones on the scene. So this is what I think happened, but I didn't know any of this. I'm discovering all this and like thinking about it after the fact. But a woman had fallen asleep with her 2 kids in a U-Haul. And then she must have crossed the oncoming lanes of traffic, because I think it's 2-lane highway. So 2 lanes both ways as well as a turning lane. So it's a pretty big interstate road. Probably not an interstate if it's connected. So somehow she'd gone down the ravine in this U-Haul, because it was very steep, like down to this creek, and didn't flip. I don't know how. So I just look down and I see, like, and we're way above it. I look down and I see this U-Haul that's straddling this creek. And my dad says to me, like, I think they might still be down there. Meaning, like, he must have seen something or saw somebody, or somebody else had pulled over. And so immediately I was just like, well, then I think I'm supposed to be, then we need to go see. Anyway, it was so steep that it was actually kind of hard to climb down. It was all shale and very Utah rocks. And so I like trundle my way down in my Sunday clothes, in my Doc Martens. And I get down there, and unfortunately the cab was on the far side of this creek, but I'm like, I don't know, like, are there people in there? Like, and I didn't know if we were coming across a ghost town U-Haul, but given what my dad's feeling was, and that he said, I don't know, I thought, wow, I need to go check. So I crossed the creek and didn't realize at the time, but like, it was actually a lot higher, colder, and swifter than I thought it was going to be. And in high school, I was a $170 at most, like sopping wet, which I was at this point. So in a sense of like it being coming up to here on me, like it probably should have swept me away. So that's maybe kind of why I know I was in the right place at the right time. So I look in the cab, and the mom's like still semi out of it. She probably hit her head. I don't know. She's kind of in and out. But these kids are like 5 and 3 or 5 and 6. I mean, just old enough to probably walk on their own, but they're also freaking out because their mom. So I was the first one to arrive, and I thought, okay, well, I should probably get these kids, I don't know, back up there as opposed to down here. And my worry was somehow the U-Haul had like wedged itself into the ravine above the creek. So the water was coming through, like, I would say at the floor level of the cab, but because it was wedged up higher, it hadn't completely submerged itself. But my concern was that at some point the water was going to come rushing through the cab, and these kids were going to be gone. And so luckily that hadn't happened yet, and I didn't know how long or if it was going to wedge down. So I grabbed these kids once again, and I'm not as strong or whatever as I was, but at one point I'm pulling them back over the river, and my center of gravity is now different because I'm having to hold these kids. And at one point I'm having to hold them pretty high so they don't get wet. And I'm not trained for this by any means. And maybe a rescue team would tell me I shouldn't have done this. And I swear I almost slipped a couple times. And like by the hair of my teeth, like my shoe was able to find like a slippery rock that it didn't like slip away on. And I got the kids back over. And by that point, because the mom was a little bit overweight, so that I wasn't able to do this with her, but the kids were in blankets at this point, and they were being taken back to the top of the ravine. And then the rescuers did show up, and they were able to get the mom onto a stretcher. And at that point, firemen started to show up. So then I was like, okay, well, let's go. And so we left. That was it. Like, so I rescue these kids. We leave. I think I'm assuming they rescued the mom. But clearly that was kind of a right place at the right time. And I was asleep even when it happened, if you will, like when we pulled up on the scene. So, I dragged 2 kids across a freezing cold Colorado creek.
I hadn't heard that story before. That's
I don't.
nice.
Not many people have.
I was fully expecting you to just lift the U-Haul out just by yourself and just
magnesis.
throw
like
it
just,
up,
yeah.
throw it back up the
It was.
ravine.
I don't know. It was probably like 150-foot ravine.
Wow.
Like it's super steep.
Wow.
If we take a golf trip to Colorado, I'll have to show you.
Yeah, that's wild. All right,
right time.
Let's wind this down with the last 3 questions then.
Okay.
So, who at Man Games would you like to see in this chair and hear their story on a podcast from this last Man Games?
Well, I've mentioned this to you, but like the rugby team was just super cool. I think one of them was actually a lacrosse player, and then the other one's like a super amazing national, professional, multiple trophies rugby player. And he was a little bit more soft spoken, but both just stand up.
Ryan and
guys.
Ted.
Ted was the one that was a little bit more outspoken and just hilarious, and also competitive, right? I think that even from an outward perspective, like those would be the guys you'd want holding your rope, right? If you had, and I just thought that was super cool. So they were ones I remember for sure.
Who was not at Man Games that should be at the next one that you know?
Rob Gronkowski. I think that he looks like he's doing everything these days, like pickleball, talking about unretiring. No, he just seems like he and his friends. I mean, is this realistic? Or is this like people I know?
Sure.
Because I would invite, I mean, it'd be cool to have some golfers there, like the Corda sisters, if we're making a wish list, I think would be super cool.
Well, that would be girl games.
But. Oh, yeah, I'd have to get them to girl games. Well, Spieth and Thomas are both available, right? Because they just did.
I thought you
Tiger
just prefaced
Woods.
this with realistic.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, wait.
Yeah,
sorry.
Tiger Woods is going to come to Man Game.
Who should be there that hasn't been?
Yeah.
I think we need to get, well, I've mentioned this one before actually, but so I could continue on this theme and say Taysom Hill, but Taysom Hill is from Idaho. But as far as like college quarterbacks, one that we do know, but Riley Nelson would be exceptional. Like he'd be really good. So I know that Taylor needs to get some GBS guys to show up.
Get Riley. Yeah.
I think
because you know Riley pretty well, right?
Because I had always heard athletic stories about Taysom doing like incredible things as far as like being fast, being strong, being able to squat a horse. And I mean, I've heard the same things about Riley. Like Riley's super fit.
Yeah.
He's really bright. And I mean, it was funny because I asked him once, like, well, what are you doing now? Like, he kind of said, I get kind of bored with workouts. And I was like, so what are you doing now? And he's like, I'm just running up hills. And I mean, and it's funny because it took me this long, and I only learned about this a couple of weeks ago, but one way to increase your VO2 max is to just run up hills. So I was like, this guy is strategically becoming undefeatable. So he's definitely one we need to get out there.
That's awesome. Okay, last one. What does it mean to you to be a man?
Well, I'll go back to the greatness, which is that I think we need to discover that we're not the center of the universe and do our best to lean into our gifts. And often that's going to mean developing a lot of selflessness as we, become our best selves.
All right. Very cool. Well, I know that from a Man Games perspective, you are a huge help from just my mental load of everything that happens. There hasn't been a Man Games that I've participated in where you haven't been on my team, and I don't plan on having that change either way until
just
you
keep golfing there.
Until you
still have a spot.
Age yourself out and you're now a part of Geezer Games or whatever you want to call it. But
I think you should just go copyright it now.
No, you're an incredible human being and a good friend. So I appreciate you taking the time to hang out here.
I'm lucky that I got invited to the first one where there was only 8 of us. So
yeah,
lucky me.
We'll do another one.
Cool.